Imagine living a relationship that seemed perfect until one ordinary day, everything falls apart. My name is Emily. For 5 years, I thought my life was exactly as it should be. I was in love with someone I believed would be by my side forever. His name was Mark, and our story felt like a fairy tale. We met in college, sitting next to each other in a literature class. It was the kind of connection you don't question. We finished each other's sentences, laughed at the same jokes, and shared dreams of the future. We wanted a little house with a garden, a dog named Max, and countless adventures traveling the world. But sometimes, life has a way of surprising you, and not in the way you hope. It started with small things. Mark had been more distant than usual, canceling plans, staying late at work, and forgetting little things, like our Friday movie nights. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just stressed. Relationships have ups and downs, right? One Monday morning, I sent him a text. "Good morning. Hope you're having a great day. Can't wait for dinner tonight. Love you." I waited for his reply, but my phone stayed silent. Hours passed, and a heavy feeling began to settle in my chest. By the time I got off work, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. I called him. "Hi, Mark," I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was racing. "Are we still meeting tonight?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, finally, he spoke. "Emily, we need to talk." My stomach sank. Those words, I knew what they meant, but I didn't want to believe it. We agreed to meet at the park, the same park where we had our first date. I sat on the bench, watching the sunset behind the trees, trying to calm my nerves. When he arrived, Mark looked different. He wasn't the confident, warm person I had known for years. His shoulders were hunched, and his hands were stuffed deep into his pockets. He wouldn't look at me. "I don't think this is working anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What?" I asked, not sure if I'd heard him correctly. "I mean us. I don't feel the same way. I think we should break up." "Break up?" The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "What do you mean you don't feel the same way?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We've been together for 5 years, Mark. 5 years." He looked down at his shoes, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know what to say, Emily. I need something different." My mind raced. Different? What did that even mean? I searched his face for answers, but all I found was the truth I didn't want to see. "Is there someone else?" I finally asked, my voice cracking. Mark hesitated. That pause, it told me everything I needed to know. I walked home that night feeling numb. The streets were quiet, and the cold air stung my face, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were loud, repeating his words over and over again. When I got back to our apartment, the place we had shared for 3 years, everything felt wrong. The photos on the wall, the jacket he'd left on the couch, even the scent of his cologne, it all felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I sat on the floor, staring at nothing, replaying every moment of the past few months. How did I not see this coming? Were there signs I missed? Could I have done something differently? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, memories of us filled my mind. Our first trip to the beach, the way he used to surprise me with flowers, the nights we spent talking until sunrise, it all felt so distant now. The next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment. Mark had taken a few of his things, leaving behind a note that simply said, I'm sorry. Sorry. That word felt like an insult. Sorry didn't explain why he left. Sorry didn't make the pain go away. For days, I moved through life like a ghost. I avoided my friends because I couldn't bear the thought of explaining what had happened. I ignored their calls and texts, burying myself under the covers, hoping the world would forget I existed. But the world didn't stop. The days turned into weeks, and I realized I couldn't keep living like this. One night, as I sat in the living room surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked, I found an old photo of myself. It was taken before I met Mark, back when I was in college. I was smiling, standing on a hiking trail with a group of friends. I looked happy, carefree in a way I hadn't been in a long time. That photo made me realize something. Somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. My life had become so tied to Mark and our relationship that I didn't know who I was without him. I knew I needed a change. The decision wasn't easy. Leaving the apartment we had shared, leaving behind the city where we had built a life together, it felt like saying goodbye to a part of myself. But I also knew that staying would only keep me trapped in the past. I started looking for jobs in other cities, places where I could start fresh. It was terrifying, but also exciting. I imagined what it would be like to wake up in a new place, surrounded by new opportunities and new people. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found a job in a small city a few hours away. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The day I packed up my things and closed the door to our apartment for the last time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, fear, hope, they all swirled together as I watched the moving truck drive away. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure: I was ready to begin again. As the city faded in the rearview mirror, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "This is your chance, Emily. Don't waste it." It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Moving to a new city is exciting, but it's also terrifying. How do you start fresh when you don't know anyone? I spent the first few days unpacking and trying to settle in. The silence of the apartment felt heavy, like a reminder that I was completely alone. No Mark, no familiar faces, no comforting routines. I wandered through the streets, hoping to feel some connection to this new place, but all I felt was the weight of everything I'd left behind. Money was tight, so I knew I needed a job quickly. After a few days of searching, I found a position at a small cafe near my apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to cover my bills and give me something to focus on. On my first day, I met my manager, a kind woman named Sarah. She showed me how to use the espresso machine, take orders, and handle the register. The work was straightforward, but interacting with customers made me nervous. "Excuse me, can I have a latte?" a customer asked on my second day. I froze for a moment. The man had a thick accent, and I wasn't sure I understood him correctly. "A latte?" I repeated hesitantly. "Yes, please." I managed to get his order right, but the interaction left me feeling insecure. Living in this new city meant I needed to improve my English quickly if I wanted to connect with people and do well at work. A week later, I signed up for English classes at a community center nearby. The classes were small, with about 10 students from different backgrounds. On the first day, the teacher, Ms. Harper, asked us to introduce ourselves. "My name is Emily," I said nervously. "I am new here." The teacher smiled warmly. "Welcome, Emily. We're glad you're here." The other students introduced themselves too. There was Anna from Brazil, Ahmed from Egypt, and Lee from China, among others. Hearing their stories made me realize I wasn't the only one starting over in a new place. The classes became the highlight of my week. Each lesson taught me new words and phrases, and I felt more confident using English in my daily life. Ms. Harper encouraged us to practice speaking as much as possible, and slowly, I began to feel less afraid of making mistakes. Despite the progress I was making, the loneliness still lingered. After work in class, I often returned to my apartment and sat in silence. The nights felt especially long, and I found myself missing the comfort of having someone to talk to. One evening, after another long day at the cafe, I sat by the window, watching the city lights. People walked by in pairs or groups, laughing and talking, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Was I making a mistake by moving here? What if I never found my place in this city? But then I reminded myself of why I had come. This was my chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was. I couldn't let fear hold me back. Things began to change when I started getting to know my classmates better. Ana, the Brazilian woman, sat next to me in class every week. She had a warm smile and a contagious energy that made her easy to talk to. One day after class, she turned to me and said, "Emily, you are doing great. Your English is very good." I laughed. "Thank you, but I still have a lot to learn." "We all do," she said with a shrug. "But that's why we're here, right?" Her positivity was infectious, and for the first time, I felt like I had a friend. A few weeks later, during a break in class, another student, Ahmed, approached me. "Emily, we are having a small party this weekend," he said. "Would you like to come?" I hesitated. The idea of going to a social event with people I barely knew made me nervous. But then I thought about the long, lonely evenings I had spent in my apartment. "Yes," I said, surprising even myself. "I'd love to come." The party was held at Ahmed's apartment. When I arrived, the room was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of delicious food. I saw Anna waving at me from across the room, and I immediately felt more at ease. The evening was a blur of conversations and laughter. I met people from all over the world, each with their own story of why they had come to the city. Some were here for work, others for school, but we all shared the same desire to build a better life. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged. That night, as I walked back to my apartment, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. Moving to this city had been the hardest decision of my life, but slowly, I was starting to see that it might also be the best. Yes, I still had moments of doubt and fear, but I was no longer alone. I had a job, classmates who encouraged me, and now, even a budding social life. This was just the beginning, but it was enough to remind me that I was capable of starting over. Sometimes, finding new friends is the first step toward discovering who you truly are. Life in the city had started to feel normal. My days followed a simple rhythm: mornings at the cafe, afternoons in class, and evenings either with my classmates or enjoying quiet moments at home. Slowly but surely, I was building a life that was mine and mine alone. One of the first changes I noticed was how much lighter I felt. Without the weight of my past relationship, I had time to focus on things I never knew I enjoyed. One Saturday, Anna invited me to her apartment for lunch. She cooked a dish from her hometown and taught me the recipe. Watching her work so effortlessly in the kitchen, I realized how little I knew about cooking. "I think it's time I learn how to cook properly," I told her, laughing as she handed me an apron. "You'll love it," she said. "Cooking is relaxing, and you get to eat your creations." That weekend, I bought a simple cookbook and started experimenting. At first, the results weren't great: overcooked pasta, under-seasoned vegetables, but I didn't give up. Cooking became my therapy, a quiet time where I could focus on creating something from scratch. On other days, I found myself drawn to the park near my apartment. At first, I went there just to sit on a bench and watch the world go by, but soon I started taking long walks. The fresh air, the sound of birds, the feel of the sun on my face, it all felt like a reminder to slow down and appreciate the small things. One evening, while walking along a tree-lined path, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I didn't need someone else to make me happy. I could find joy in my own company. It wasn't just the hobbies or the routines that were changing me, it was the act of rebuilding myself from the ground up. Each small step, whether it was cooking a meal, making a new friend, or learning a new word in class, felt like a victory. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Writing down my thoughts helped me process everything I'd been through. One night, as I flipped through the pages, I came across a line I had written shortly after the breakup: "I don't know who I am without him." Reading those words now, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I knew who I was. I was Emily, a woman who had faced heartbreak, moved to a new city, and was slowly but surely finding her way. The more I embraced this new version of myself, the less I thought about Mark. In the beginning, his name had been a constant presence in my mind, like a song stuck on repeat. But now, weeks could pass without him crossing my thoughts. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed with a message. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up. It was from Mark. Seeing his name on the screen didn't make my heart race or my stomach drop the way it once would have. Instead, I felt nothing. "Hi, Emily. I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about you lately." For a moment, I just stared at the message. In the past, I might have agonized over what to say, or whether I should even respond. But now, it felt simple. I typed back a polite but brief reply: "Hi, Mark. I'm doing well, thank you. I hope you're okay too." And that was it. No longing, no sadness, no urge to reopen old wounds. As I put my phone down and returned to cooking, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The breakup wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the beginning of something better, a journey to rediscover myself. I smiled as I stirred the pot, the aroma of herbs and spices filling the air. My life was far from perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. Seeing Mark's name on my screen didn't unsettle me. The message felt like a quiet echo of a past I had already left behind. As I placed my phone back on the counter and returned to stirring the pot on the stove, I realized just how much I had changed. The person I had been when we broke up would have stopped everything, dinner, her thoughts, her whole evening, just to analyze his words. What did he mean by thinking about you? Did he regret leaving? Did he want me back? But tonight, I felt none of that. There was no confusion, no longing, and, surprisingly, no anger. I sat at the small table by the window, enjoying my meal and letting my mind wander. This apartment, this quiet moment with nothing but the sound of the city in the background, was a life I had built from the ground up. I didn't want to go back to who I was when Mark was in my life, not because he was a bad person, but because I had outgrown the version of myself that existed with him. Later that night, I picked up my phone again. The message still sat there, waiting for my response. I could have ignored it, but that didn't feel right. Ignoring it would have meant that some part of me still cared too much. Instead, I decided to reply, simply and honestly. "Hi, Mark. Thanks for the message. I hope you're doing well too." That was all. No questions, no openings for further conversation. Just a polite acknowledgement. I hit send, placed the phone down, and immediately felt lighter. Over the next few days, I found myself reflecting on how much my life had changed since the breakup. In the beginning, I thought losing Mark meant losing a part of myself. For years, our lives had been so intertwined that I couldn't imagine who I was without him. But moving to the city, starting over, and learning to stand on my own had taught me something important. I wasn't defined by that relationship. I wasn't defined by anyone but myself. I thought about all the things I had accomplished since the breakup, small things, maybe, but meaningful to me. Learning how to cook, making friends in my English class, exploring the city on my own, finding peace in simple routines. These were all things I had done for myself, and they were proof that I was capable of creating a life that made me happy. For so long, I had been afraid of being alone. But now, I realized that being alone didn't mean being lonely. It meant having the freedom to discover what I truly wanted, without anyone else's expectations or needs influencing me. One evening, I took a long walk through the park. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the trees were starting to turn shades of orange and gold. As I walked, I thought about the message Mark had sent me. Part of me wondered what he had hoped to accomplish by reaching out. Did he regret the breakup? Did he miss me? But another part of me realized it didn't matter. Whatever his reasons were, they had nothing to do with me anymore. My happiness wasn't tied to him, and it hadn't been for a long time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and purple, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had pushed me to start over, for the challenges that had forced me to grow, and for the people I had met along the way who had shown me kindness and support. Most of all, I felt grateful to myself for choosing to move on even when it was hard, and for creating a life that felt true to who I was. That night, I sat down with my journal and wrote a single sentence. Leaving the past behind was the best choice I ever made. I thought about the people who might still be where I was months ago, heartbroken, afraid, unsure of how to move forward. If I could, I would tell them this: it's okay to feel lost. It's okay to not have all the answers right away. But if you keep moving, one step at a time, you'll find your way. Sometimes, the hardest decisions lead to the best outcomes. Choosing yourself, even when it feels selfish or scary, is never the wrong choice. As I closed my journal and prepared for bed, I glanced at my phone one last time. There were no new messages from Mark, and I felt no need to check for one. Whatever connection we had shared was a part of my story, but it was no longer the story I was living. This was my life now, imperfect, but mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Comprehension questions. Where did she move to start a new life? What did she discover about herself? Interactive quiz. What does move on mean? A. Keep thinking about the past. B. Start fresh and let go. C. Call your ex.